Hello, everybody. Welcome to Shadow at Night. This is Wednesday, January the 8th, 2025. Ooh, I almost said 2024 again. And I had been labeling all the titles of my shows, at least on Rumble and maybe on Facebook and YouTube and all of the others as well, as 2024 for the first week of the year. To which a viewer pointed that out via message to me today, and I hopefully have corrected it all. I mean, really, who has to write down the date these days when you've got these things, the smartphones, which aren't good? Well, they're good, but they're not good because they take up so much of our time. It's funny, during that conversation I was having with my son last Friday night, if you'll recall, we got into it later on in the extension about how we're already implanted with the chips with these things. I mean, when you leave the house, and you haven't got this thing with you, do you have a sense of panic? Oh my God, I forgot my phone. And then you go rushing back to get it, even if it's like 5 miles. It's crazy. We have to find some way to break our link with these things, or they've already got us. Anyway, Jasmine Lane of Opinionated with Jasmine Lane, mostly on YouTube. We're going to see if we can get her to diversify a little bit tonight and grab more platforms because she's got such a good show. I first noticed her a few months ago on YouTube. Younger person, great opinions, picks out things that a lot of people miss when it comes to politics in Canada. She is going to join the show in just a couple of minutes. The Shadow at Night live stream, as always, is brought to you by Canada Nano Silver. Oh, that's a picture of me when I was about 27 or 28 years old. And the reason I brought that to your attention, I wasn't sure if I was going to show this, but I thought, what the heck? That's me and my on-air partner at the time when I was working at City FM sometime in the mid-90s. Natalie Strecker is her name. But the reason that I bring that to your attention tonight is because Jasmine, she's of that generation now. She's in her 20s, and I want to get where the younger generation is with all of the stuff that's going on around us these days, because there is so much, and so many people have said, hey, Shadow, how come you can't reach the younger people? I said, because I'm not a younger person anymore. I think I am, but I'm not. We need the younger generation to step up, and that's what Jasmine has been doing. The show is brought to you by Canada Nano Silver, the Recover Muscle Cream. Now, Kevin and Anna from Canada Nano Silver are in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico right now, and they're staying in this loft. You got to take stairs up there, and Kev sent me a video of how steep these stairs are, and he says his knees have been getting to him, so he's been using the Recover Muscle Cream, and it's been working wonders on those knees. Experience the ultimate comfort and relaxation as Recover works its magic, formulated with cutting-edge technology. The power of Silverceutical technology, the advanced muscle cream provides unparalleled relief, catering to your unique needs. Get this and all the other fantastic products like the immune gummies and the lozenges for the throat, because, you know, it's cold and flu season. All that and more is available on the website, CanadaNanoSilver.com. Again, that is CanadaNanoSilver.com. If you're looking for a retail location near you, you can find one all across the country now. There's over 35 of them to choose from. There might be one right across the street, because people these days are selling this stuff from their basement, their garage. It's a great side hustle, and it's great product as well. So check it out for yourself. And if you'd like to become a retailer of these awesome products, get a hold of Kevin and Anna. They'll answer your email even while they're on vacation in Mexico at the contact tab at CanadaNanoSilver.com. Again, that is CanadaNanoSilver.com. Jasmine Lane joins the show. Jasmine, thank you for coming on tonight. We really appreciate you taking the time.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you for that groovy music in the intro during the countdown.
You like that, huh?
I do an awful lot.
You know, it's interesting. I've been I don't want to say I've been investigating you. It sounds like I'm stalking, but, you know, somebody brought to my attention a couple of weeks ago, you should have Jasmine Lane on. And I said, yeah, that's a good idea. I've been watching a lot of her stuff. So a couple of days ago, I messaged Jasmine and she said, yeah, let's do this. I noticed that since you've been out of radio, you've found a lot of spare time, a lot of time to relax and be a person again. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that has been, it's so, I don't want to get into it too much, but you can relate certainly. You spend so many years of your life where you have it ingrained into your brain that you say yes to everything. And if you say no, somebody else is going to say yes. And so you just work yourself to the bone and you love it. Some days it doesn't even feel like work, but it takes such a big toll on you and you don't even realize it.
No.
Being out of that now, I'm kind of like, whoa, I spent like 11 years of my life slaving away, like missing out on birthdays and important family things because there was something going on and I had to be on the radio or there was an event or whatever. And so it's really beautiful and really incredible to actually have my life and to be like, you know what, I'm going to sleep in until 8 and which is very late for me. And then I'm going to go see my nephews and maybe I'll go for dinner with my mom after, like all these things I could have never, ever done before.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? You know, when you wake up at that time of day. My last radio gig was on Chorus AM talk radio for those of you watching from across the country. And by the way, hello, everybody. I didn't do the hellos tonight because I wanted to bring Jasmine on. It's like I was waking up at 3:45 every day and showing up at work at 4:15 because it's an information morning show and you had to get you had to be up to date on every single thing by 5 o'clock in the morning. And I just thought, this is crazy. I can't do this any longer.
Humans are not built for that at all.
No, you're living your life out of phase with everybody else, right? It's not like a complete opposite schedule. You're maybe 4 or 5 hours away from them. So noon for us is like 7 a.m. for everybody else.
Yeah.
And
that's so true.
It's permanent jet lag. So you got out of that and you started doing your own thing.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you start doing this? Is it just because it's in your blood and you've got concerns? You can't get out of it?
This is kind of a maybe perhaps a little bit of a sadder answer. It's long-winded though. You know, I first became interested in the political landscape when I was about 13-ish. I grew up very poor. I'm the youngest of 6. You know, like I shared a bedroom and a bunk bed with my stepsister in a trailer, and we never had satellite TV growing up. And I used to always just watch whatever the bunny ears could get me. And so around that time frame, CTV News was usually it. And I remember always watching the political debates that would go on. And Jack Layton was a huge, huge inspiration for me at that point in time. There was just a lot of things that he said, even though I was so young at the time, I couldn't quite understand the gravity of them. It just made me feel something. And around that same period of time, you know, I got way too interested in conspiracy theories. We lived very rurally, so we had no cell phone reception. I'm not like, we would put the cell phones up against the window upside down in one spot in the house where you could maybe get a single bar. So because of that, I read a lot. I read everything. I'd take out books from my school library and just read and read and read. I'd print out so many papers and just read them all the time. And they were usually about like the NWO or the Book of Revelation, like just a lot of weird things for a 13-year-old to be involved in. It's funny even to that, to like a little anecdotal story, I suppose. I recall when I was in grade 3, I think it was, I did a presentation for my class about the harms of like methamphetamine. I was in grade 3, but like, it's just because I had heard about it and I was like, I don't want my friends to fall victim to this. And I've always really, really loved researching. I've had such a huge passion for that. And politics is a really big one as well. And I think in recent years, I lost my partner of 10 years to suicide. And I recall so many of the conversations that he and I had, and he was really involved politically. And there were so many things that he would share with me that just without a doubt, it absolutely correlated. Like, oh no, the political landscape affects absolutely everything in the world. You had the third and now fourth wave feminism, which is just all of these privileged women saying you don't matter because you're a white cis male. Like, what the hell does that even mean? And just seeing those things and seeing how damaging they were to everybody as a whole, because it felt wrong. Like intrinsically, it's like you hear something really crazy and it feels wrong because it's not right. And some people get convinced that that is the new right, but it's not. And so I just, it was very interesting to be a young woman at that point in time when all of that was developing, and to see firsthand how much my friends were changing, how much the world was changing. There were all of these crazy things going on and crazy allegations, and sometimes they turn out to be false. And it just got me really, really invested in it. And then I would say, it was about a year and a half ago now that he took his life. And he had always really wanted me to do something on YouTube and stuff, because it was something we would talk about all the time. He bought me a Ben Shapiro book for my 21st birthday. So it's something very much that he had involved me in. But I was always too scared. I worked in traditional media at the time, very scary place to be, to have an opinion on just about anything. And I kept a lot of things to myself. But after he died, my therapist at the time had said, grief completely changes everything about you, and things that matter don't matter, and things that didn't matter mean absolutely everything now. And I really did find such an awakening, I suppose, in that, because all of a sudden, all of the things that my brain was stopping me from doing, the things my brain was saying, don't do this, this is risky, I just didn't care at all. And my heart was like, screw all of this. Like, I'm so sick of being shut up. I'm sick of seeing how these ideologies and identity politics are just playing such a disastrous role on everybody, specifically young men. And there was a stat that came out not terribly long ago, where the rates of women dying from breast cancer annually are now lower than the rates of men under 30 committing suicide. And to me, the correlation with when those numbers really started to spike was, in fact, with a lot of the rhetoric that we hear nowadays, where, no woman wants, maybe there's a few, most women don't want some weak, pathetic man. We want a leader. We want somebody who's strong, who works hard, who takes care of us, and who takes pride in all of those wonderful things that he does for society. And we had society really, really turn against our men. And that obviously stands out, because it's something that I really saw, the ugly, evil side of, for sure, for many years of my life. And I'm, kind of living with the pain of that now. And I'd say that, so yes, lots of things kind of all involved, for sure. But I would probably credit him more than anybody to actually just saying, I do not care anymore. And you are not going to tell me what to say. You're not going to tell me to shut up. I know that this is wrong. I feel it in my soul that this is wrong. And I cannot just sit idly by and smile and nod, even though in my head, I think it's wrong. I know that I'm not alone, because there's no way, probability wise, that I could be alone, that I'm the only person on earth who feels this way. And it was pretty eye-opening. I've always been pretty open about my politics within my friend group. Most of my friends are roughly on the same page, some of them slightly different, but it's just been crazy to me, the amount of young women, especially, that I have coming forward now, people who send me DMs and emails saying, I'm so happy that you're talking about this. No girls talk about this. Oh my gosh, thank you so much. I go to university, and if I ever had these conversations, I'd have no friends. And so it's just been the whole thing, really. I don't know if you're religious or not, but I certainly am. And I always think about, just, there's so many examples and stories of times where you are given a really, really difficult decision. And that decision could be either you're going to do something finally, or you're just going to sit by and continue to be miserable and continue to feel stifled and silenced. And so for me, I obviously had something very traumatic in my life where I decided I'm not sitting by anymore. I hate all of this, and I'm done pretending like it's okay. And I'm tired of people not talking about it, because this is true. This is absolutely true. Facts don't care about your feelings. Just going to throw that one out there.
It's interesting. I'm sorry to interrupt you here. I was talking to Jasmine on the phone this afternoon. I said, look, go ahead. Just, if you get on a roll, go ahead. And you said your record was 8.5 minutes. You were on some other podcast a while back. I think you may have broken that just now.
No.
That's okay. I've got a million
your
questions.
Fault.
I've got a million questions I want to ask from everything that you were just saying. And I guess the first one is, you're talking about your friend group, and you're in your 20s or maybe your early 30s now. I don't know. I don't ask women how old they are, because
watch it. Late 20s.
Late 20s. Okay, we'll go with that. Your friend group, what do they feel? Is there a lot of acceptance of this transgender stuff, or climate change stuff, or are they like completely and totally against it, just scared to speak out?
You know what? I think a lot of people feel similarly to my own views. So I'll share those so that I don't kind of risk speaking on behalf of all of them. But, for myself in regard to the transgender issue, I don't know if saying it's an issue, it's a thing that exists. But like I personally I'm very fiscally conservative. Socially, I'm pretty centrist for the most part. I don't want anybody to suffer. I want people to be happy, to thrive, to live their best life, for lack of better words. And so with that one, I think there was a lot of people similar to myself that were totally fine with it until you give people an inch and then they take 27 miles, which is really what happened with that entire movement. And it got very evil and very ugly and very narcissistic very quickly. And I think a lot of my friends, we were kind of on that journey together, and we all met at the same point. It just took some of us a little bit longer to get there, but we started off being like, yeah, of course, sure, that makes sense. People shouldn't be treated poorly because, they feel like doing whatever the heck it is that they're doing. They're not hurting me. Who cares? And then all of a sudden you had this 6'3" Leah Thomas, and dressing with all the girls in the changing room down in the US of A, who was once, what was it, like 400 something. And now all of a sudden he's placing first and beating these women, and there's photo ops and they're taking the awards and medals away from the other women and giving it to him. And then we all kind of started to think like, okay, well, wait a second. Like, let me ask you this. And this is probably a rhetorical, but how many trans men do you see doing the same thing? Oh, yes, there isn't any. There is not any, actually. But you do see a lot of trans women doing things that are very much stomping all over women, and women are sharing their spaces, which for the most part is fine. Like, to be honest with you, I don't really care. But having said that, it's fine, I guess, to make an exception or two because I don't want to be rude. And it becomes a very, very big problem when it is this expectation and it's forced upon me. And I realize that nobody is getting the short end of the stick here except for us. And nobody's talking about that. Like, suddenly trans rights became more popular than women's rights. Why can't we just all have rights and make room for people? Why do I have to have less room so somebody can have more?
Well, what got me about this more than anything was all of the women who were just going along with it.
Oh, they still do. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's because
like the mothers,
also,
Jasmine. I mean, you got mothers, and there was one thing that Menzies did from Rebel News, where there was a swim meet or something in Toronto or one of the suburbs around Toronto, and it was like 12-year-old girls. And there was a 55-year-old dude identifying as a 12-year-old.
I heard about this.
Right? He went and talked to some of the parents who were watching in the gallery there, and he said, there's a 55, and the guy was a college professor, I believe, too. There's a 55-year-old man undressing in the same room that your daughter is in right now. Do you have any feelings about that? And they stood there, and they just kind of, they didn't want to say anything. And who knows what was going on in that dressing room? 12-year-old girl, 55-year-old man? Come on. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'd have been right down there bashing heads.
I think the whole thing, and as I said too, like at the end of the day, I want everybody to be happy as they can possibly be. I'm not at all advocating that we all start treating people poorly or anything like that. But the way that these policies have been placed make absolutely no sense. And they prioritize one over the other. That's not good in my view. And it makes me feel sick also. It does. And it's just these things that, as I had said kind of earlier, that it's not right, but you want to be nice and compassionate and you don't want to stomp on anybody. But then you also see people really, really taking advantage of that. And that really hurts my soul because, think about it for you. If you were just some random person and you knew that something made everybody around you feel uncomfortable, the vast majority of us would probably shell up at least a little bit and try to not make people around us feel uncomfortable. But what has happened instead is this insane virtue signaling, this insane it's almost like it's like a fetish. It's a fetish, I think, in some cases. Certainly, it seems
No,
that way. It
in
seems,
all cases, it's a fetish. That's
yeah.
all this
Like
has
if
ever
you
been.
actually are fighting to like go change in a change room with little girls, that's really something that you need to think about, you know? Like that's really weird, especially when there's other opportunities, you know, you could use literally any other space. There's community restrooms, community change rooms, but you chose to do that. Like you felt like you were so morally superior to any of these people that you were okay making them feel uncomfortable, offending them, potentially scarring them depending on their age. For what? So that you could feel superior that day, or so that you could get off on it. I just, that aspect of that I really don't like, and I do see a lot of younger women rejecting, but of course they would never say so publicly because they would lose their jobs and everybody would call them a phobe, which is just so silly to me because I'm like, no, I'm not a phobe at all. I love you. I hope you have a great life. I wish you all the best. But please get away from me in some of these private spaces. I don't even like when women change in the women's change room. It freaks me out. I'm like, what are you doing? There's a bush everywhere. Get out of here. Go into a stall, please. I don't need to see all of you. Maybe that's just me. Well, I'm like, I don't want to see it from anybody, to be honest with you. That's why they have change rooms that are private and you can lock the door.
You worked in radio during the pandemic response, right? Were you
Yes. Mhm.
okay? So please, I didn't. I was out of it before then, and I have no idea what that must have been like in terms of like, I mean, were you doing your shows from home, or did you have to go in? What was the atmosphere in the radio station like? Were there certain things they told you you absolutely could not say regarding the shots or masks or anything?
Oh, absolutely. So I was fortunate enough. I was working mornings for the majority of it. I did a midday show for a period, and then I switched companies during the middle of it, kind of. But throughout the entire pandemic, I was always one of the very few people that were actually in the office. It was ridiculous, a lot of the policies that we had. And there was absolutely like zero discussion about anything. You were not allowed to give your opinion whatsoever. You could share the news articles that were published on CBC, CTV, Global. That was it. No opinion, no talking of anything at all that is against get vaccinated. Like that was the only message that we were allowed to share, if anything. You know, we also had the option of just not talking about it. Obviously, that was quite difficult to do during that period of time.
What would the repercussions have been if you had said on the air something like, "These things kind of came out quickly, didn't they?"
Who?
Would you have been hauled in and disciplined over that?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I actually recall even during the trucker convoy, there was and I at the time was not aware of the backlash of it. I just kind of, when I first heard about it, I was like, this is pretty cool that people are doing this. Like, rock on. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And while we were on air, we had a conversation about it. And the one point that I made, and I was mostly trying to be silly as well, like I wasn't taking it seriously at that point in time, was the fact that I had one of my girlfriends coming in from out of town. She was making a long drive, and I was really excited to make her homemade bruschetta with some of the tomatoes that I had stored from the harvest earlier in the fall. And I couldn't find basil anywhere.
That's a homemaker. She was making taco soup when we talked on the phone this afternoon, just so you know.
Oh, it turned out very nicely, by the way. Thank you for your support on that one. The shadow
Absolutely.
touch. But I had really wanted to make her homemade bruschetta, and none of the stores had basil because I guess whatever truck it was that was supposed to carry basil, I don't know. The girl did not do the job. They were out in Ottawa, something like that. And so I had just made a really silly comment about how I was like so upset about these policies because I really just wanted everybody to get back to work so that I could get some basil. And I ended up becoming known as Basil Girl for about 8 months on social media. It was awful. There were Reddit pages dedicated to how disgusting I am and how out of touch I am. And yeah, there was absolutely talks from management, which is just insane. Like imagine being me at the time. What was I, like 26, 25 years old, And I am sitting there with my manager who's like, you shouldn't have talked about basil girl. It's like, it's just so crazy to go back in time to those moments.
You got to be kidding me. Like something as inconsequential as I wish there was trucks hauling basil and they were, wow.
But I think a lot of that though too was due to the public backlash, right? And it was a really hard time where people were angry and they were stuck in their homes and they were bored out of their faces. So they would get enraged and blow up and get totally irrational about just about anything. I don't blame them for that either. Isolation, not a fun time, clearly. But I think a lot of the backlash that we would receive and some of while they never specifically said, don't say this, don't say that or you're going to be on the chopping block, the threat was certainly there. And it was there even as well. I remember when October 7th first happened. Wow, that was an intense one where it was do not speak about this at all. No opinions whatsoever. Don't read any stories about it. Do not include this in your news. Absolutely nothing. And I even recall one time there was a story where Justin Trudeau had been he was sitting in a restaurant in Toronto, I believe, and there was a number of protesters who had, I guess, kind of swarmed the restaurant. And I was not aware that these were pro-Palestine protesters at the time. I just knew that they were protesters. And so I did a story about how Justin Trudeau got swarmed at this thing. They had to call in a blank amount of police officers. And I got yelled at over that. I remember, and like I said too, I'm like, I didn't even know that was in relation to it. I didn't know that. And just a lot of things like that where it was really intense, a lot of intimidation. I would say more than outright threats or instructions. There was a lot of intimidation and, you knew what to do and what not to do.
Yeah, this is not a great atmosphere for creative types at all to be walking around on eggshells, wondering what you can say and what you can't say when you're supposed to be trying to put together a fun and entertaining morning radio show. Yeah.
Oh, it was awful.
That's insane.
It's crazy going back and thinking about it now is like, whoa, okay. I did that. I remember getting, because I got vaccinated more than I would have liked to. And the only reason why I did was largely because my family really wanted to see me. And they were like, the only way that we'll see you is if you get vaccinated. And I'm like, I don't care, whatever, fine, I'll get vaccinated. Like that.
Okay, let me ask you about that. Like when you first, obviously getting to know how you think just in the first 20 minutes or so of this show, you were probably against that. Like everybody watching this right now, they knew, wait a minute, there's got to be, you can't come up with something like that for a novel virus in 8 months' time. I mean, that's absolutely preposterous. So when you sat down in that chair to get that needle, what was it like for you?
It felt a lot like the movie 28 Days Later. Everybody's lined up at the convention center. It is okay. Honestly, it is just so crazy. And I feel like I have suppressed these memories of lining up outside of somewhere super sketchy, by the way, in like a really weird part of town, because it was the only place where they could get anybody in. And you're sitting there in the freezing cold because the lineup is around the block of people who are all waiting to go in, either get tested or get their shot. And it's just, and then you go inside, you're sniffling your nose. No shit. You were just outside for 45 minutes longer than any human being should be when it's -50 outside. And you're all, I better not sniffle because everybody around me, like it was such an insane sociology experiment. Like it was so crazy to be a part of that. And I remember very early on, I think I was a lot more naive at that point, and there was a lot of research in regards to medical malpractice and money trails that I hadn't investigated as much as I would have liked to beforehand. And so there was a lot of things where I just, gosh darn, it's probably the worst quality about me, but I'm like, I have such a hard time just believing that there is really evil intent behind things. Like I am like, there's no way that that's the first option. There's no way that that's the first option. And so with the vaccine, I recall having those thoughts of, this isn't very logical. This doesn't actually make a lot of sense. Weird, but okay, well, it can't be that bad, I guess. Like it can't be that bad, and you just kind of go along and you do it. And then you hear of all these things later on, and then you hear just recently Joe Biden grants immunity till 2029 for the makers of the mRNA vaccines. That's weird that
Yeah.
you would have to grant them immunity, isn't it? If everything was totally safe and fine, why would you need to grant them immunity? That's kind of
Until
weird.
2029, right? Like
Uh-huh.
right after Trump is out of office. Go figure.
Like
That's
that's weird.
that is strange. But the feeling, I'm getting to the point where you sat down in the chair finally after all
Hmm.
that waiting at the convention center. You're outside, you're sniffling, you come in, people are freaking out because you're sniffling. And you finally get to that point where, all right, it's your turn. Did you feel like you wanted to get up and leave before they were able to
Oh,
stick you?
I remember feeling like that in the entire lineup. Like I was mad that I had to get it from the get-go. I thought it was stupid. I remember I fought with my mom over it. I'm like, this is silly. This is dumb, And at that point in time too, we already knew the survival rates. We already knew that it wasn't really affecting children a whole lot. Like we already knew all of these things, but then they were still telling us this. And it's like in my gut, I was like, this is dumb. I don't like this. This is so stupid. Why is mascara at Shoppers Drug Mart not an essential item? And even though it's right there behind the red tape, I can't go and grab it and buy it. Do you know how ugly I am without makeup on? Like that is essential. Dr. Brent Rusin, Teresa Tam, that is essential. Okay. But so just throughout that entire experience, it was like everything about it just felt so morally wrong, so intrinsically wrong. I couldn't quite put a word to it at the time, but it wasn't right. I knew that something was off. But
Did your
again, it's
show? Let me ask you.
sorry.
Did your? I know that's all right. I'm just going to try and pop in when I can because you've got a lot to say and it's cool. Your show, Over Opinionated, which by the way is a great name. Did you come up with that on your own? That's a great name.
Yes, it used to be a radio bit that I did about celebrity drama, and it ended up getting squashed after a couple months. And so when I lost my job in radio, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to bring that back. I like that name.
It's a great name, and that's where you can find her on YouTube, Jasmine Lane, Over Opinionated. I'm not sure how often you put out new episodes. So what is it, like every day, every second day? How often?
I try to every day, but as I was telling you earlier when we were on the phone, I am a very based girl, and I do like to bake and cook, and I got a lot of laundry to fold, so I tried my best to put out a video every day, but I definitely miss a few every once in a while.
You're getting a lot of response over on YouTube there, like
Thank
50,
you.
60, 70,000. That's great. And building a big following. Did that show overlap with your radio career? Was that affecting what you were doing on the radio? Is that one of the reasons they let you go? Like, what happened there? If you don't want to
I
talk about it, that's cool. But
There are some details that I know of that I will not share, but when I was let go, it was a week after I received the Western Broadcast Association's Leaders of Tomorrow Award. I got called into the office one Friday and they said, "We're making changes to the show." And I said, "What does that mean?" And they said that I was not going to be on the show anymore. I asked why. And this is what my manager did. That was it. And I walked down the hall and I was done. I never went back. So I
welcome
don't
to the
know.
wonderful world of radio, folks. That's
Yeah.
mine was a little bit more intense than that, but it was before all of the nonsense started and I wasn't clued in yet.
Yeah, my YouTube stuff though, I had started a couple of months prior to that. I can't say definitively if it was related. I wouldn't be surprised if in some way, shape, or form it was, because I was starting to get, to my shock, like I had no idea that it was going to be as engaging for some people as it is, and have so many people invested in it, which is just, I'm so blessed for that. But I do recall at the point, I think when I had reached about maybe 10,000 subscribers or something, which happened very quickly. One of my co-hosts did yell at me in a meeting about being very selfish for pursuing YouTube. So, and then the meeting was halted. Our manager stopped it. And that was about it. That was the last we ever talked about my YouTube. So I don't know if it was related. I wouldn't be surprised if to an extent that it was. But
I was thinking more the content that you were sharing as opposed to the fact that it was selfish.
yeah,
How is it selfish exactly that somebody wants to build their brand online?
yeah,
Like, I
you
don't get
tell
that.
me.
That's somebody who obviously has got a very small wee wee. But the content you do share, I find it interesting. There's this whole new wave of young creators coming up, whether it's on YouTube or Rumble or any of the other social media. You've got this Moose on the Loose guy talking politics. It's just fantastic to watch the engagement. Are younger people now becoming more engaged with what's
I
going
would,
on around them? And if
yeah.
so, why is that? I mean, are they seeing the tent cities popping up? Are they seeing less opportunity? Because, from my perspective, old guy perspective, we look at the young people and go, oh yeah, they don't want to work. They're just going to live in their parents' basement until the parents die and will take over the house. I mean,
We have to live in our parents' basement. There's no other options right now. Gosh.
right. No, we get that. I mean, like you can work 2 or 3 jobs. And this is what Pierre Poilievre has been saying. He says I meet a guy working in a steel mill in Hamilton. He's working 2 other jobs. He's got a young family, still living in his parents' basement, can't get out, doesn't think he'll ever be able to afford the down payment on a house and all of that. Is that what young people are going through these days? Because it certainly wasn't like that when I was in my 20s.
It's really interesting, and I think there's a lot of different things at play, but I would say some of the largest, certainly affordability is a big one. I do also see a lot of young people who have finally realized that the government and powers that be keep saying things, and they can say things all that they want, but just because they say them doesn't mean that it's true. And I know amongst a lot of younger people that I know, a really big awakening for them was a lot of the insanity with the woke movement. People bought onto it for a little while, and then, as I said before, you give them an inch, they take a mile, and people started to get really sick and tired of that. But especially, I know for younger men, like I have a friend of mine whose son is 16, and I've known him since he was a kid. I know all of his friends, and that's something they talk about a lot, was the censoring of certain speech. Like they kind of grew up always saying like, oh, that's gay if something was like dumb or whatever. And they don't mean it in any way, shape or form in a bad way. It's just the language. That's just how people talk back in the day. Yep. And then they would get called out for things like that. And I think there was a lot of internal rage that started building with people when it came to that, especially in the education system. And then I think truly the ultimate one would just be the lies. I think people really started to realize a lot of these lies, and our mental health really started decreasing. Suicide rates are up like 287% over the last 5 years alone. And people really started to realize like, well, wait a second. Why are you going to complain to me about how I shouldn't drive to work if I can even find a job right now, thanks to the increase of immigration that you've caused us? I can't even do that. But then you're going to be mad at me and punish me when I go and try to get gas. And you're going to punish me when I try to buy groceries. Like you're punishing me with these stupid taxes on all of these stupid things that we don't need the stupid taxes for, because the stupid tax doesn't actually do anything for the environment. The only thing the stupid tax does is help poor people. It's a wealth redistribution program by all accounts. And then also give the government in excess of $4 billion extra a year to try to pay down their whopping deficit. And I think there was a lot of young people too that really started to wake up to that and say like, this doesn't make sense. And you're saying something and doing the other, and it's confusing. There's these mixed messages, and I'm just actually not really into it. And I felt that myself as well. It was funny. You had asked a little bit earlier about climate change related things, and my Lord, was that ever an eye opener for me. It's unreal. The amount of
most people from your generation believe that that's a real thing.
I think a lot of people from my generation believe that climate change is real. Sure, the climate is changing. Sure, there might be some things that happen that may change it. Maybe there is something that we're doing, but at the end of the day, as long as Taylor Swift is taking a jet for a 15-minute ride because she doesn't want to be stuck in 4-hour traffic in Los Angeles City, and then she's going to tell me about climate change, no, thank you. I'm going to reject that offer.
Yeah,
So,
the same with DiCaprio and Trudeau and all of these big climate
Yeah.
change meisters out there who are saying, "Oh, you can't drive your car, get an electric car, get a heat pump." And
oh dear God, a heat pump, by the way, which is subsidy to Mark Carney's program. Why don't you get wrecked, actually? Like, that is so embarrassing that you would even suggest that, Justin Trudeau. That is so embarrassing. How pathetic is that? Here's the thing about climate change that drives me the most mad. Every single person knows that if you want to have a better environment, the first thing, because yeah, sure, we don't want to have pollution. Smog cities look awful. They taste bad. They smell bad. If you've ever been in one, it's not a fun time. But if you want to drive home this whole like climate change narrative, why the hell are you making life more uncomfortable than it is? I feel this way also when it comes to the whole green thing. I'm going to bounce this off you. Tell me what you think. So,
right.
You know how they started saying, oh, well, we want to be net zero by whatever. We're going to spend trillions upon trillions of dollars to be net zero, even though we have no data, no research, no idea actually what that is even going to mean or look like, or if it will even change the Earth's planet by a single degree. But we want you to stop driving to work. We want to encourage you to go biking. We want to encourage you to take public transit, which I don't want to because public transit smells like urine and other things for that matter. It's gross. I don't want to take it.
By the way, if there's anybody who doesn't believe in the great replacement theory, just get on a bus in any city and you'll see very quickly exactly what the hell is really going on. Or a mall. Go to a mall.
It's gross.
Anyway.
It's gross. I hate buses. They're so yucky.
You don't want to take transit, but you were saying, please.
Sorry.
That's all right.
They say we want you to go and do all of these things. It's going to help the planet. I'm going to keep flying private though, but you guys should suffer a little bit more to help the planet. And then you start to see around the same time frame, they push all these EV vehicles, these battery plants get built, tons of money invested into them. And then of course they cease production. They don't actually make anything because, oh, shocker, nobody's buying them. And around the same time frame, you also started to notice bike lanes. And I have this theory that our governments, provincially and federally, are all a part of this crazy climate cult. And they are trying to make life as inconvenient as possible so that we are forced to comply. That's what I think is happening. You add bike lanes to routes that make zero sense in cities where it snows for 9 months out of the year. That's stupid.
Jasmine, you have come to the right place. We have investigated the entire bike lane smart city 15-minute city plan, and it all has to do with a UN group which is called ICLEI. And ICLEI is part of the Canadian Federation of Municipalities, and over 400 of these municipalities across our country have signed a declaration and agreement with ICLEI Canada, which again is part of the United Nations, to come up with smart city plans. So I'm not sure if you've noticed this or not. You know about the WMR, the Winnipeg Metro Region 2050 plan, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so all of these other municipalities across the province, the latest one being Steinbach, then Emerson before that. Apparently Emerson, a town of 700 people, needs a new transportation plan. 700 people. Like, what's that? 3 streets and 1 stoplight. Morris, cool. a town of 2,000 people, needs a new transportation plan. They've got one going up in Roblin. They've got them going up in Dauphin. It's all over the province because the province passed something called Bill 37 about 18 months ago that requires every municipality to come up with one of these smart /15-minute city plans. Same thing going on in Toronto. Same thing going on in Montreal, Vancouver, Edmonton, Calgary, all across Saskatchewan, man. It's all across the country. So yes, you are onto something there.
Well, you know what? I'm not surprised at all that ICLEI would do things that are very icky. That's all I have to say about that.
Look into that a little bit more because
absolutely.
It is very interesting. Let's get back to your generation for a second. Here's something I've noticed. I go to this gym down the street, And there's a
Wow,
lot of young,
congratulations.
thank you. And I see a lot of young guys there. Not a lot, I shouldn't say a lot. There's not a lot of younger guys there, guys in their 20s, early 30s. And what I'm noticing is that guys of your generation are becoming what women call, and I hadn't heard this expression up until about 6 months ago, soy boys
Yeah,
or
losers.
or
You can
beta
thank
boys.
feminism for that.
Well, yeah, I mean, they've been beaten down, as you were talking about earlier in the show. So, what's your take on the attack on masculinity, and what do guys need to do to fight back against this attack?
It is so difficult because girls are crazy and I'm one of them. I'm crazy sometimes. So it's not like I'm not calling anybody else out. Like you should, if my boyfriend does not come home on the dot when he tells me he's going to come home, I get crazy. That's just, it's in our blood.
Yeah, but that's normal stuff. I mean, that's normal stuff. That's something that we've grown up with, and that's intergenerational, something like that. I'm talking
I,
about just the way guys are from generation to generation. I see a lot of these buns that are,
oh God.
like, what the hell
You
is
know,
all of this going on?
I don't mean to be too judgmental here, but I do
Feel
think
free.
I'm going to sound like such a conservative nut with this one, but I do think that there is certainly, at least for some individuals, something to say about not having strong men as role models in their life. I think that's very significant. Hell, if you even just look at our government, does that sound like a weak or a strong man to you? Does it? No, not really. Like you don't like look if you turn on the TV, who do you see that inspires you? Timothy Chalamet? Mhm. If
I
there's a
don't
zombie apocalypse, there's no way he's saving you.
I don't
Like,
know who is Timothy Chalamet.
I
I
can't
was
believe
going to
you
get
don't know
back
who
to
that is.
who
He's the
is
guy
it?
in Dune, the new Dune movies. He's like the main
I
character.
they
Oh my
remade
god.
Dune.
Okay. Well, you can
I'm
Google it.
old. But I did see the video and played it on the show of Justin Trudeau grooving out at the Taylor Swift show a few weeks ago. And yeah, right. And with the friendship bracelets of the
That
young girls.
he's still wearing as well. He still
Yeah.
has them on.
Did you find that odd?
Lame? Yeah, definitely. You
No,
know what?
not
I
lame,
think
odd. I mean, like,
very
it
odd.
seemed he was veering off into some sort of territory. I mean, here I am, a 60-year-old man, and if I had a 15-year-old daughter and I went to the concert with her, that's one thing, right? You sit there, you watch the kids having a good time, but you get
Mhm.
up and you're grooving, doing the white man's overbite with all of them, and then you're doing the friendship bracelet thing. I mean, he was getting too into it, I thought, and
Yeah.
creepy. I thought it
I
was
have
creepy.
I have like such a hard time with it because there's a compassionate side of me who's like, okay, he went with his ex-wife. That part, I don't know, whatever, co-parenting, I guess, sure. Or maybe they aren't actually separated. I don't know at this point. But like he went with his ex-wife and their daughter. And I'm like, that's a nice little family outing. Okay. I can give you some slack in that regard if it was just a nice time with your family while Montreal is burning and you don't even address it until like 10 a.m. the next day. That's fine. But the part to me that I thought was kind of odd is I'm like, you're the prime minister. Like, why wouldn't you get a box seat? You know, where like nobody can see you. And also, don't get me wrong, I'm not a Swiftie myself, but also like I've never danced like that at a concert. And when I was 15 or 16, I would be mortified if my father was with me in public anywhere. So, like, the whole thing, I'm like, oh, it's a cute family outing. But also, like, dad's really getting in there. And those 16-year-old girls that he's dancing with and exchanging bracelets with, like, that's not your voter base. So, I don't, if this is actually just you, then, I mean, I don't want to shame you if you just love Taylor Swift. Like, that's cool, I guess. She is a government plant, so that makes sense that you would love her.
Okay, all right. So you just said something very interesting that I haven't heard before. What is all this government plant stuff? Talk to
Well,
us.
let's just think about Taylor Swift, okay?
Mhm.
She's oh my gosh, this is gonna get me canceled. She's not a very good dancer. She writes pretty mediocre music. She has mediocre hair as well. You know, like she's just overall a very mediocre person.
Well, I don't get what the thing is about her, but I mean,
Exactly. mediocre. She's nothing crazy with her performances, never has been. It's not like she has this insane voice like Adele, or I don't know, I'm trying to think of somebody else that you might be more familiar with, and I can't, of course. I don't know. Do you listen to like Ozzy Osbourne? He sounded okay back in the day.
Yeah, I know who Ozzy Osbourne is.
Chris Cornell. She's not a Chris
Okay.
Cornell.
No, not at
So
all.
and I've just kind of noticed something just so interesting with the development of her career. She started off when she was very young. I believe that could have been real. I don't know. I personally think, though, that there's a lot of people who are absolute plants. I really do believe that. And there's CIA departments and stuff that are kind of involved in that, where you have people that they turn into celebrities. Essentially, they increase their views and their engagement. They make them famous, and these people help to push narratives. And Taylor Swift has endorsed the Democrats in every American election. And isn't it also weird that she's been doing that, and almost around the same time frame as every American election, Taylor Swift has also been on a massive world tour where she's able to do that? Like, there's just these things where it's so odd to me how much people love her, because she's pretty, like, I'm not saying she's bad. Her album Reputation was amazing. I love that album. But she could have been anybody singing it, you know? Like, it's nothing. I don't understand the hype about her. And if you think as well about how quickly she shot up to like #1 status, that doesn't make any sense. How does Beyonce, or something like somebody like Beyonce, I suppose you could compare, like, doesn't sell out shows at nearly the capacity that Taylor Swift does? That none of that makes sense to me.
Oh,
And I've noticed certainly that there's a lot of narratives, government narratives, that Taylor Swift will always pick a side on. And you won't hear about her ever. Like, she won't share anything about her personal life or anything. But then she'll just say something about that one particular controversial issue or something and pick a
yeah.
side.
Do
And
do
so
you
I think she might be a plant. That's a total conspiracy, but I think she might
No,
be a
it's
plant.
I absolutely agree with you, and I know the Tavistock Institute has been involved in, influencing our societies at least since the 1950s, and some people even say the same thing about the Beatles and Elvis going
Mhm.
back to the 50s and 60s. They were plants too. And not necessarily knowingly. Like
Yeah.
these guys just, they were tapped to be the ones to drive the young girls crazy
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
change the generation, right? And I think maybe that's what they're trying to do with Taylor Swift right now.
And you know what? Actually, hold on. We have to go back, because Taylor Swift plays a good role into me answering your previous question about young men. Taylor Swift goes and gets super famous around, she's been super famous for a while, but she really ticked up in popularity around the same time as third wave feminism started to become really, really popular. What does Taylor Swift do? She writes breakup songs, and she writes songs about being a powerful, strong woman who don't need no man. That's what Taylor Swift does. And then you have this third wave feminism that starts to peak around like 2010-ish, I think, was when it was really starting to get up there. And I just think, to me, I'm like, that seems to be connected. This really big push of, we don't want women to be having children anymore, Western women to be having children anymore. So we are going to do everything that we can. Oh, we're going to give you free birth control. Like, we're going to, which, by the way, is nice. Thank you, I guess. It saved me $10, but still, like, it's just all of these things have been pushed very much to completely disrupt the nuclear family. And why is that? Well, very simple, because anybody at all that has something to fight for, that means something more than themselves, is going to fight for that thing. So what are they trying to do? This is such a conspiratorial episode.
It's not
You're welcome.
conspiratorial because I've covered this before. And I was just about to ask you if you know the 4 tenets of what Yuri Bezmenov, the former KGB spy, was interviewed about in 1984. Have you seen that?
I absolutely have, but it is not fresh on my memory at all right now.
Basically, it's demoralization,
Mhm.
destabilization, right? And that's, I believe, what we're in the
God.
throes of right now.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
more to it. I haven't seen it in a while myself, but these are the definite things that they are trying to do to our society today. Look at all these Palestinian protests. They're funded by somebody.
Mhm.
We've already got connections. We've already established at least 3 or 4 connections. One to George Soros, obviously, who just got the Medal of Honor from Joe Biden the other
Yeah.
day, which is insane. So there is this manipulation going on, being pushed by World Economic Forum, by the United
Mhm.
Nations, by all of these people that you've heard the names of, and you're not supposed to say, but we say them here all the time, right? This
Because there's
is,
something going on, clearly, like, without a
yeah.
doubt. And at this point in time, it's like, to anybody telling me to shut, "Oh, you're crazy. You must be fun." Holy man, that was the funniest part to me of all of Trudeau and his team in regards to Russian interference. Don't get me wrong. People have interfered in elections and manipulated things throughout history. Welcome to Earth. That does happen. But it is just so insane to me how the overall takeaway from that I hear constantly from lefties who are losing it in my comment sections on videos that I post, where they will say like, "Oh, well, this is exactly what Vladimir Putin would want you to say." I'm like, how the hell are people so stupid that you actually think that an entire population of society who leans conservatively on issues only got their reasoning because of what Russia wanted to, because of Russian propaganda? Like, are you so stupid that you actually think nobody else can think for themselves except for you, but you don't even think for yourself at all? And that's why you think I'm funded by Russia. Like, that is so, it's so stupid. I can't.
Listen, let me ask you a question. And this is something we talked about on the phone this afternoon. I want to bring everybody else in now. We had been doing, Ken Drysdale, myself, and a lot of other folks with Manitoba Stronger Together. It's an organization that Ken has formed to try and come up with new political strategies to get rid of the uniparty that is running the province of Manitoba right now. And so we've been going to these different municipalities, speaking to people about their smart city / 15-minute city plans. And obviously the new world order comes up, the World Economic Forum comes up, Klaus Schwab's association with Chrystia Freeland and Justin Trudeau and Mark Carbontax Carney and all of these people. But I looked down at a crowd, one of the first events that we did, and there was about 400 people there. And I was looking at the crowd going, is there anybody here under 40? And maybe a dozen people put their hands up, and I went, oh my God, we're not reaching the young people the way we need to. So I spoke to the people about trying to find a way to do that. Talk to your adult kids about what's going on in the world right now. Get them involved, because they're the ones who are going to have to carry the torch going forward. So here we are, a generation apart. And I'm asking you, how can people of my age, or maybe a little bit younger, maybe a little bit older, talk to people your age, again, maybe a little older, maybe a little younger, about what's going on in the world and how to get them engaged in this? I mean, I think you've been doing a fine job of it.
Thank you.
We got to get it out there.
I really do think that it is such a sensitive topic, and more so than it ever has been. And I think that comes after so many years of this propaganda and people being completely indoctrinated in our school systems and being suppressed and really pushed out of their own critical thinking, their own freedom of thought. And I think that it becomes very difficult because you have people who, I used this example recently with somebody else, but when you think about a child who, let's say they're in a crib all day and their parents never pay attention to them, a horrible reality that lots of children face. When somebody finally comes over and picks them up out of that and they give them a hug, you just see these kids burst with emotion. Like, they're like, "Oh my word, thank God somebody's paying attention to me," because they were so capable of that. They were capable of so much more than what they were given or led to believe they were capable of. And I think that you're seeing a similar effect with a lot of young people who have been so stomped on and silenced and really just indoctrinated and brainwashed with these ideologies, these things that they get at them from a young age for a reason. And I think that it's so difficult to speak with young people because, similar to children, who aren't loved enough, and then they're finally given a little kiss on the cheek or whatever it may be that just lights up their whole world. What these young people were given instead is like a cause or an ideology to fight for. And they will fight to the deaths for this ideology because that is literally all that they have. And I see that a lot. And I think it's why a lot of people too are so vitriolic when it comes to this stuff. But I really do believe that a lot of this comes from how suppressed they have been and how much they've been instructed, this is right. That guy over there is crazy. And you don't even want to get down the path of thinking like that guy over there, because if you even start to think like that guy or start to do your own research or watch anything other than this one influencer that Trudeau's government paid $2.5 million to over the last 3 years, if you do anything else other than that, then you're going to be crazy and you're going to be ostracized and you will no longer be a part of the group. And I think a lot of this, and we had the isolation of the pandemic as well, where people are they're clinging on to anything that they can get their hands on. They feel so insecure, they feel so stomped on, and they are so desperately trying to have meaning and value in their life. And things that once very easily created meaning and value have been completely condemned. Things like having a family, things like saving yourself until marriage, these things that really mean something to your soul and what you put out into the world by carrying yourself in a certain way, have just been completely eviscerated. And so what do these kids have now? They feel more insecure than ever. They are depressed. And they feel so desperate to feel like they mean something. And right now, meaning something has taken place in, from the river to the sea. They don't even know what they're talking about. They don't know what river or sea. They couldn't even point it out on a map, as one example of many. But
so
I
we
really
have
do
to break through conditioning, years of conditioning.
I think yes, absolutely. I don't think it's going to happen overnight. But one thing that's really beautiful is truly all it kind of takes is one. And it takes one person to be willing to risk being isolated from the group. We have this herd mentality. The fact of the matter is the vast majority of us are sheep. Whether you want to admit that or not, that is truth. And so I think that it's going to be really challenging, but I'd say actually probably my best piece of advice is and this is hard. I know how hard this is because I talk to people in my comment sections all the time about this stuff. But I think one of the best pieces of advice that I could give is to do it. This sounds so awful, but just very gently, like young people today, if you even get to the point of saying like, I'm right and you're wrong, you're done. They are not listening to you, and they are going to fight for the cause stronger than they ever had before. And again, that comes from feeling, I believe, so insecure and really not having anything of meaning in their lives anymore.
Is it about making a logical argument, or is it about coming from a place of emotion? Maybe.
Ooh, that is. See, if for me, I'd say logical, duh. But truly, I think emotion is probably going to be, and to be fair, yeah, we have soy boys nowadays. Like we have very sensitive kids who talk about their feelings a lot. I'm generalizing, obviously, but I do think that taking things in a way that is so polar opposite to like vitriol or trolls in comment sections, and to just speak to them really logically. Like I have plenty of friends that don't agree with me on everything. And one thing I say when I get asked, people are like, how could you ever be friends with somebody who like voted for Justin Trudeau? I'm like, yeah, I don't agree with her policies on things at all. But having said that, like I know where her heart is on certain issues. And so that kind of makes it easier because I understand where her concerns come from. And that helps me. And I think also too, it's so educational to talk with people that you don't agree with. Like it's the most amazing thing in the world that we all don't agree with everything, because if we did, we'd probably be living in North Korea and not even know it. So I think it's incredible really that we don't all agree, and you can learn so much from everybody. But I would really encourage, depending on the age, of course, but to handle it very gently. Or, hey, listen, this is going to be the easiest way ever. Everybody listen up here. If you want to make one of your young people come over to the right side of history, just get them to follow Jasmine Lane. There you go.
Oh, that's right. Where can we find you, Jasmine Lane?
So I am up on YouTube. It's just at Jasmine Lane, spelt like you see it on the screen. There is no E at the end of Jasmine. I'm on Twitter and TikTok as well under the same username. And you can also find me on Rumble and Spotify.
Excellent. Build up those other platforms. You never know if you're going to say something that YouTube doesn't like, they're going to take you right down.
Mm-hmm.
But you've been doing a great job, Jasmine. Thank you for coming on tonight, and hopefully we'll get you back again one of these days very soon.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Awesome. Talk to you later. Jasmine Lane. You can find her on YouTube. That's where I first found her a few months ago, and her stuff is golden. And she's over opinionated with Jasmine Lane. I still have some things I want to cover for you guys tonight. So here's what we're going to do. We are going to the extension whenever I'm done with covering these things. And I think this is very important, you guys, because this video was released by the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms yesterday. I only saw it this morning, and I'm very stoked about this. You know, Trudeau prorogued Parliament on Monday when he announced that he was intending to step down. Here is James Manson. Every time I say that name, I get a chill. Manson, not James. Here is James Manson from the JCCF talking about the article that they have filed with the Federal Court of Canada.
Well, good evening, everybody. James Manson here, constitutional lawyer. By now, I think quite a number of you have probably seen the news on social media that the organization that I work with, we've been able to file a challenge to Prime Minister Trudeau's prorogation of Parliament that happened yesterday. That document was filed sometime this afternoon, and I would expect that hopefully we'll be getting going with that case on an urgent basis very soon. Certainly the court will appreciate the gravity of the situation. But I wanted to reach out, to explain to everybody who's interested, exactly what the case is about and what we can expect maybe going forward. First of all, the case is interesting and very important and really quite unique in our country. It never happened before. It's never happened before that a couple of litigants, and in this case, the litigants are two citizens of Nova Scotia. They have challenged the Prime Minister's advice given to the Governor General to, as I say, prorogue Parliament. So there's nothing inherently wrong with prorogation. Prorogation really is a temporary suspension of Parliament. And usually what that is to give everybody a chance to legislatively reset the situation. So oftentimes what happens is the government will have a speech from the throne. There will be a direction laid out by the speaker, or pardon me, by the monarch, by the Governor General in this case. And once that legislative agenda is finished, then there needs to be a new direction. There needs to be new department instructions given, and there needs to be new, momentum established for new legislative policies, things like that. And that's normal. Yet that usually happens probably once every parliament or so. However, where it gets tricky is that you can't have it done. You can't prorogue Parliament to avoid political trouble. That's really what it comes down to in this case. Our case is remarkably similar. That's how, anyway, we will argue the point, to the case in 2019 when Prime Minister Boris Johnson in the United Kingdom, he attempted to prorogue Parliament for 5 weeks out of 8. And the timing was very, very tricky because, as you guys may recall, that was when the Brexit was coming, and they needed to have an agreement with the European Union about how to exit from the EU. And if they didn't, there could be a hard exit, and it would have been very catastrophic economically, politically, for the UK and maybe for the EU. So anyway, Prime Minister Johnson at the time decided anyway to prorogue Parliament for 5 weeks of the 8 remaining weeks leading up to the Brexit. And essentially, he wanted to avoid scrutiny from Parliament. He wanted to avoid the tough questions, avoid all of the mess in the House of Commons that was happening at the time. And so ultimately, this led to a challenge like the one that we've brought today. And the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom ruled unanimously, 11 to 0, that the exercise of the prorogation power by Prime Minister Johnson to advise, at that point, the Queen, to prorogue was unlawful. And essentially what the Supreme Court of the UK said at that point was that you can't, in the course of proroguing, you can't frustrate or prevent the ability of Parliament to oversee the government, to do its job, which is to oversee the government, to supervise the government. Because as we all know, it's Parliament that is the supreme body in a Western parliamentary system. It's Parliament, not the government. It's Parliament as an entire body that is actually the supreme body of the country. So in any event, that's what we're saying happened in this case. We are suggesting that, like what happened in the UK when Prime Minister Johnson did what he did to really frustrate the will of Parliament to supervise the government, we're suggesting in the same vein that in this particular case, the Prime Minister has prorogued Parliament in order to really gain some political advantage here. He has given us his reasons, as you all know from yesterday's press conference. The reasons are to reset, not legislative resetting, but to reset the tone or the acrimony that he's been seeing in the House. Well, there's a way to do that. It's called have an election. There's a way to do that. It's called face the opposition, have a motion of non-confidence, and have an election. That would be the democratic and legitimate way to reset Parliament. There's another issue, which is that why 11 weeks? This is an 11-week prorogation. That seems to be an awfully long time simply to have everybody's temperature cool down, to use the Prime Minister's words yesterday. And thirdly, there's also the stated intention of allowing the Liberal Party to have a leadership race. Now, I am not speaking politically at all in this case. However, what I'm doing is I'm speaking from a legal point of view. And as the UK said, the Supreme Court in the UK said, there must be a reasonable justification. And a Liberal Party, a political party's internal leadership race really has nothing to do with the business of the government. That's a party matter, not a government matter. In any event, we say that in this case, the prorogation was without a reasonable justification, and therefore it really never happened. What happened in the UK case was that essentially the Supreme Court found that the advice to the Queen was never properly given. Therefore, it never really happened. It wasn't of any real consequence. And so the UK Supreme Court decided that Parliament, in fact, had never been prorogued, and that it was free to resume sitting at the next day. So that's what we'll be asking the court, the federal court in this case, to conclude as well. If the court is sympathetic with our argument and decides to allow our application, grant our application, we would expect, again, Parliament to resume sitting at the earliest opportunity.
All right, so we don't know what kind of chance the JCCF is going to have with getting the courts to overturn this prorogation, whatever, but we do know it's the Federal Court of Canada they're going to, right? So remember early last year, maybe exactly a year ago now, January 23rd of last year, the federal court issued their decision on the applications for judicial review, finding the invocation of the Emergencies Act during the Freedom Convoy in 2022 was unreasonable. So if we get that same judge on this, and I heard that he was retiring, but I'm not sure if he has yet, possibly we could get this prorogation overturned, because it's not going to come from the Governor General. Look at this.
Governor General Mary Simon presents awards in commemoration of the Persons case on the 95th anniversary of Persons Day. The award recipients are recognized for their contributions to the advancement of gender equality.
In the spirit of reconciliation, I also want to acknowledge that we gather on the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Tsuut'ina, the Lithka, Nakota nations, the Otipemisiwak Métis government, and all people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 region of southern Alberta. The fight for gender equality is like a long climb up a mountain. Today, I'm so happy to see women thriving in all spheres of Canada's economic, democratic, and cultural life.
All right, we don't need to see any more of that. We know that Mary Simon is not going to do anything against the wishes of Justin Trudeau, so it's going to be up to the courts. Do we have a chance to win? Sure. And Justin Trudeau knows that as well. Don't think for 1 second that he's not thinking there is no way the party is going to be able to come up with a leader in time before we have to go back. March 24th is when this prorogation is supposed to end, and they're supposed to go back to Parliament. First of all, this would be a very abbreviated leadership race. Nobody wants to enter it. Even Dominique LeBlanc said today, I don't want it. I'm not entering. Liberals are asking him, please, will you reconsider that decision? I don't want it. Nobody else has decided to throw their hat in the ring for this. So who does that leave? That leaves Justin Trudeau. So regardless of whether this prorogation stands or whether it's overturned by the court and we get an earlier election, the bottom line is there's not going to be enough time for the Liberals to come up with a new leader. Justin Trudeau is still the leader of the party, and he will. I can guarantee, this is a prediction of mine. This is not based in anything factual, but I can guarantee you that he will be the Liberal leader in the next election. Nobody wants it. And then after he gets completely and totally steamrolled, whether it's in February or whether it's in March or May or whenever the election is, that's when the Liberal Party is going to take time to reconstitute itself. And that's when they're going to start getting some serious leadership candidates. And people like Mark Carney and Chrystia Freeland will then throw their hats in the ring. Maybe even Melanie Joly and Francois Philippe Champagne and all of these guys who don't want it now. And they don't want it now because they know they're going to get their asses kicked in the election. It's that simple. But what I still don't get is why they're clinging on to power so hard now. Is there something coming that's going to prevent an election? But we do know that Trump is certainly rattling some sabers down there in the United States. And, you know, there are people up here who say, hey, man, you know what? I don't see how it would be a terrible thing if we joined the United States. Not necessarily as a state, but maybe we just kind of join together economically. We start spending the US dollar instead of the Canadian dollar. Would that be so bad? We'll still be Canada, but we'll be an official protectorate of the United States. Kind of, sort of a territory, not necessarily a part of the United States, kind of like Puerto Rico. I don't know. And something else that people fail to realize, and by the way, this is hilarious. You know, the last few years, liberals, all liberals, have been yelling and screaming, "You're a white nationalist." And now, who are the ones standing up and saying, Canada will never, ever, ever become a part of the United States? Wouldn't that be something nationalist to say? It's all the liberals. We're never going to allow Donald Trump. So they're trying to fight this election against Donald Trump now. And Pierre Poilievre has kind of been pushed into the background a little bit these last few days. And I'm wondering if that's a good thing. And I noticed that Max Bernier is trying to make more of a splash on social media these last few days as well. And I think that's a good thing, too. I think it's time that the PPC comes out of hibernation and starts actually campaigning. Now, the liberal leadership rules, I think we covered this a little bit last night. They're wonky. 14-year-olds can vote in this liberal leadership if, in fact, they have one. They're not changing their constitutional rules, is what I'm saying here, even though Liberal MPs are urging them to reconsider that decision, because you've got people who are not Canadian citizens allowed to vote in this leadership election, if in fact they have one, and people who are as young as 14 years old are allowed to vote. And it also opens up this election to more foreign interference, and for a party that keeps yelling and screaming at their opposition to get the clearance, you would think maybe they'd do something to clean that up just a little bit. Donald Trump has officially sent a letter. Well, the U.S. here, even though Trump does not officially represent the U.S. yet, this is from NPR.org. The U.S. has sent a letter officially notifying the United Nations that it's leaving the World Health Organization, starting the formal process of withdrawal that President Trump first threatened back in April when he halted funding to the WHO. Wait a minute. Is this an old thing? It's 2020. All right. Somebody sent me this and I thought it was, I thought it was, it caught me. They caught me. Wow. I'm usually railing on other people. Hey, check the dates on those stories. Okay. Well, Donald Trump is removing the WHO from the United States, or removing the United States from the WHO. That is going to happen. How far is it going to go? I don't know. I don't know. And what other countries are going to join him? Who knows? Maybe Canada will be forced to. Greenland? Panama? I don't know. But yeah, he is going to be taking the United States out of the World Health Organization again, which is going to be a blow to them. It's going to be a huge blow to them because they do a lot of the funding they do a lot of the funding for the World Health Organization, even though China and other countries control it more or less through leadership and private philanthropists like Bill Gates and whatnot. So this is going to be an interesting thing. And as Trump said, they're going to try and form this new health organization, this new World Health Organization. How is this going to affect Google? And the reason I say that, Google and YouTube, the reason I ask that question is simply because anytime you say anything that could possibly be in contrast to what the World Health Organization has ruled on or stated about vaccines or illnesses, pandemics or whatnot, then they will shut you down. They will take your video down. That's what YouTube does. And Google will not allow those searches to appear anywhere in the first 10 pages of a search if you're looking for something like that. So if the World Health Organization is removed from the United States, Google being a United States-based company, would they still be able to go with the recommendations and the statements made by the World Health Organization, or will they have to find a new organization to align themselves with? What I'm asking is, will this alleviate the censorship on YouTube and Google somewhat? We know Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg said last night, Facebook is going to be getting rid of the fact checkers. It's going to start in the United States and then it's going to spread outward to the rest of the world. Hopefully we're next so we can get rid of all of this ridiculous censorship. Anyway, this can be the last story we do for you before we move to the extension on shadowdavis.com for the all access members. This may look like a feel-good headline, but it's not. It's on left-wing corporate CTV. Time for a refresh. The University of Alberta is rebranding DEI. So they're keeping their DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion policy, but they're changing the name of it to ACB. The president of the University of Alberta says the decision to rebrand diversity, equity, and inclusion, their policy, was not influenced by critics. Bill Flanagan says the university in Edmonton officially renamed its policy this month to Access, Community, and Belonging. After consultations with more than 1,000 members of the campus community, including students, faculty, and staff, we have to be frank that some of the language around DEI can be seen by some to be polarizing, Flanagan said in an interview with the Canadian Press. But what's really driving this is not me reading the papers about what's going on in the United States. This change in language is one that really originated from our own community. This was not a result of external matters. That's BS. Anytime you rebrand anything, what you're trying to do is remove your attachment to that thing, whatever that thing happens to be. So they're trying to make it feel like there is no DEI at the University of Alberta. We've got ACB, but that's not really the same thing. This is nothing but a bunch of crap. This is a lie. He knows it as well as anybody else, and no matter how he tries to explain it away, we know better than that. Here's what I say, President of the University of Alberta. Get rid of the policy. It is discrimination based upon sex and race, period. And it should, for some reason, it should be against the law in this country. But if you're white, you can be discriminated against. It's true. And you can look it up And any of the codes of any of the, what do you call them? The human rights organizations, province to province to province across Canada. All right, guys, that's it for the show tonight. By the way, C11 and C18, yeah, I talked about that last night, Edna. We still have those two laws in place. C63 is not happening, by the way. It's never going to go through now. But we need to get rid of 11 and 18 right now, because those are the censorship laws that are absolutely killing independent media in this country. It's absolutely insane. Darren, thank you for being here tonight. Cora, thank you for watching on Facebook. Catherine, thank you for watching tonight. Cheryl, Justin, Barb, Stephanie, Derek, Ellie, Earl, Catherine. By the way, Jasmine texted me and said, thank you all for me to thank you all for the very nice words that you said about her in the comments. I'll catch you guys tomorrow night, 8 o'clock Central, for another Shadow at Night live stream. And for those of you who are all access members at shadowdavis.com, I will see you on the extension in 2 minutes time. I love you all. I appreciate you all. Thank you for being here tonight.